When a 7-foot alien war champion with plasma cannons and tactical nanobots sneers at a human maintenance worker and declares her species too primitive for real combat, he's about to learn why Earth's military doesn't teach surrender as an option. What happens next isn't just a fight. It's a masterclass in why the galaxy's most advanced civilizations still lock their doors when humans walk by. If you're ready to witness the kind of cosmic reality check that turns alien supremacists into cautionary tales, then smash that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with anyone who needs to understand why mocking humanity is the last mistake most aliens ever make. Trust me, you'll want to subscribe for more legendary HFY content that proves why we're the species every alien parent warns their kids about. And today's story is just the beginning. The thing about interstellar maintenance work is that nobody expects you to be interesting. Wrench had been counting on exactly that kind of invisibility when she took the job aboard Nexus Station. 3 years of keeping her head down, fixing atmospheric recyclers, and collecting her credits without anyone asking uncomfortable questions about her service record. She should have known better than to think aliens would leave well enough alone. "Behold the human specimen," announced Keith Vore, gesturing toward her with one of his 4 arms, while the other 3 adjusted various pieces of his ceremonial combat harness. Observe how it hunches over its primitive tools, unaware that true warriors have evolved beyond such manual labor. Wrench didn't look up from the plasma conduit she was rewiring, though her grip on the fusion spanner tightened imperceptibly. The hegemony champion stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the arena's harsh lights, bio-enhancement ports glowing a soft blue along his spine. Around him, a diverse collection of the galaxy's self-proclaimed warrior elite had gathered for their weekly ritual of comparing enhancement modifications and debating combat philosophy. "The Terrans still fight with their hands," chimed in Zexhai, a crystalline being whose species had replaced their organic limbs with adaptive metal constructs centuries ago. "I studied their military archives. They roll around in dirt, striking each other with closed fists. It's adorable, really. Adorable." Kethvor's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. "My dear crystalline friend, you mistake barbarism for quaintness. Humans haven't learned that combat is an art form, a dance of superior technology and tactical enhancement. They're still animals playing at war." The 3rd member of their little philosophical circle, a being whose species name translated roughly to "those who ascended beyond flesh," rippled its energy form approvingly. Indeed, true combat requires the harmony of advanced weaponry, protective shielding, and tactical analysis systems. What humans practice is mere, what do they call it? Wrestling. "Brawling," corrected Zexhai helpfully, though I believe some of their more primitive subspecies refer to it as fighting dirty. Wrench's spanner made a small grinding sound against the conduit housing. She'd been listening to variations of this conversation for months now, ever since the arena circuit had decided Nexus Station made an acceptable neutral ground for their warrior cultural exchange program. Every species in the local cluster seemed to have opinions about human combat methodology, and those opinions ranged from patronizing to outright dismissive. "You know," said Chief Petty Officer Reynolds, settling down beside her toolbox with 2 cups of synthetic coffee, "most people would take offense at being called primitive animals." "Most people don't have my particular employment history," Wrench replied, accepting the coffee without looking up. Reynolds was good people. Career Navy, transferred to station security after a plasma accident took most of his left leg. He understood the value of keeping certain topics off the official record. "Speaking of employment history," Reynolds continued, lowering his voice, "Jenkins from engineering mentioned you might want to know that Kethvor's been asking around about human combat capabilities. Apparently his last 3 opponents weren't challenging enough, and he's looking for variety." Variety. Wrench finally looked up, her expression carefully neutral. That's one way to put it. The way I hear it, he's convinced that humans represent some kind of evolutionary dead end. Thinks our species never learned proper warfare because we're too stupid to develop real weapons technology. From across the arena preparation area, Kethvor's voice carried clearly. The humans send their warriors to die with chemical projectile weapons, while proper civilizations deploy energy shields and tactical nanobots. It's almost tragic, this clinging to obsolete methodologies. Almost, agreed Zexhai. Though I confess to a certain anthropological fascination. Imagine fighting without enhancement systems, without energy weapons, without even basic biomodifications. How delightfully primitive. The being of pure energy shimmered. Perhaps we should invite one to demonstrate their techniques. For scientific observation, you understand? It would be illuminating to witness firsthand how pre-technological species approach combat. Reynolds glanced at Wrench, noting the way her jaw had tightened. You know, you don't have to listen to this garbage. We could grab dinner in the civilian sector, avoid the whole circus. Tempting, Wrench admitted. But I'm almost finished with this conduit array, and they pay overtime for arena maintenance work. That's not why you're staying. No, she agreed. That's not why I'm staying. Kethvor had moved closer, apparently drawn by the novelty of observing a human at work. Fascinating. Look at how manipulates those crude implements. No neural interface, no haptic enhancement systems, just organic appendages grasping metal tools. How do your species accomplish anything of significance with such limitations? Wrench set down her spanner and turned to face him. Up close, Kethvor was even more impressive. His exoskeleton was clearly military-grade bioengineering. His forearms moved with hydraulic precision, and the various ports and interfaces scattered across his torso suggested connection capabilities with weapons systems that probably cost more than her annual salary. We manage, she said simply. Manage? Kethvor's mandibles clicked again. My dear primitive creature, I have studied your species' military history. Your soldiers carry chemical explosive devices and primitive kinetic weapons. They lack energy shielding, genetic optimization, or tactical enhancement systems. Most cannot even communicate telepathically with their weapons platforms. How do you call such crude methods combat? Around the arena, other aliens had begun to take notice of the conversation. Wrench could see credits changing hands. Apparently, someone had started a betting pool on how long it would take her to either run away or break down crying. The odds, judging by the gestures being made, were not in her favor. I suppose, she said carefully, it depends on how you define combat. Define combat? Zexhai had drifted over, its crystalline structure refracting the arena lights into prismatic patterns. Combat is the application of superior technology and tactics to achieve dominance over an opponent. It requires intelligence, strategy, and proper equipment. What humans practice is mere, what is your term, fisticuffs. Fisticuffs, Wrench repeated. That's a good word, very old-fashioned. Precisely, Kethvor gestured triumphantly. Ancient and obsolete, like your entire approach to warfare. True combat is an elegant synthesis of advanced weaponry and tactical superiority. What your species does is crude animal behavior. The energy being rippled approvingly. Perhaps the human would be willing to demonstrate these fisticuffs for our edification. As a cultural exchange, naturally, we could observe firsthand how pre-technological species resolve conflicts. Oh, that's rich, Reynolds muttered under his breath. Wrench looked around the arena, taking in the assembled crowd of alien warriors and combat enthusiasts. They were all watching her now, some with amusement, others with the kind of scientific curiosity usually reserved for laboratory specimens. The betting pool had apparently expanded. She could see more credits changing hands, along with what appeared to be exotic matter and rare element samples. "You want a demonstration?" she said. "Indeed." Kethvor's bioenhancement ports pulsed brighter. "Nothing dangerous, of course. Perhaps you could show us how humans— what is the phrase? Throw hands? It would be most enlightening to witness such primitive techniques." "Throw hands." Wrench stood up, brushing dust off her maintenance coveralls. "That's another good phrase." Reynolds caught her arm. "Wrench, you don't have to prove anything to these— No," she agreed. "I don't have to prove anything." She looked directly at Kethvor, who was practically vibrating with anticipation. His bioenhancements were already running preliminary combat algorithms. She could see the data streams flickering across his tactical display interfaces. Around them, the crowd of alien warriors pressed closer, eager to witness what they clearly expected to be an amusing cultural demonstration. "Tell me something, Kethvor," Wrench said conversationally. "When you study human military history, do you focus on the battles we won or the ones we lost?" "Your species rarely wins against properly equipped opponents," he replied dismissively. "Though I admit, you show admirable persistence despite your technological limitations." Persistence. Wrench nodded thoughtfully. That's one way to describe it. She stepped into the arena's center ring, empty now except for the standard safety barriers and monitoring systems. The alien crowd followed, forming a loose circle around the designated combat area. Someone had activated the recording systems. Apparently, this impromptu cultural exchange was deemed worthy of preservation for posterity. "Standard arena protocols?" Kethvor asked, his combat harness already beginning its startup sequence. "Energy weapons permitted, shields active, tactical enhancement systems engaged." "If that's how you prefer to fight," Wrench replied. "How I prefer to fight." Kethvor's mandibles spread wide. "My dear primitive creature, that's how civilized beings conduct combat. What you're about to witness is the application of advanced military science to—" "Kethvor," Wrench interrupted gently. "Yes?" "Shut up and fight." The arena's preparation chambers buzzed with activity as word spread through Nexus Station's entertainment district. What had started as casual mockery was rapidly evolving into the kind of spectacle that drew crowds from 3 sectors away. Wrench found herself assigned to Preparation Bay 7, a sterile white cube designed to accommodate various alien physiologies during their pre-combat rituals. She sat on a metal bench, still wearing her maintenance coveralls. "This is insane," Reynolds said, pacing the small chamber like a caged predator. "You realize half the station's security force is placing bets against you? The other half is wondering if they should intervene before this turns into an interspecies incident." "And what's your assessment, Chief?" Wrench asked, pulling a small toolkit from her belt and examining its contents with professional interest. "My assessment? You're either the most confident person I've ever met, or you've got a death wish." Through the chamber's observation window, they could see Preparation Bay 1, where Kethvor was undergoing his pre-combat procedures. The hegemony champion lay motionless on a specialized table, while robotic arms attached weapon interfaces to his bioenhancement ports. Streams of tactical data flowed across holographic displays as his combat systems synchronized with the arena's monitoring network. "Look at that setup," Reynolds muttered. "Plasma cannon integration, energy shield generators, tactical analysis processors. His suit probably has more computing power than our entire maintenance department." "Probably," Wrench agreed, threading a length of wire through her fingers. In the corridor beyond their chamber, alien voices carried clearly through the ventilation system. A group of what appeared to be military observers had gathered to discuss the upcoming demonstration. "The human female shows remarkable composure for a pre-technological specimen," noted a voice that sounded like grinding metal. Most primitive species display significant anxiety when faced with superior opponents. Anxiety requires understanding of one's limitations, replied another voice, this one melodic and multitoned. Perhaps her species lacks the cognitive capacity to recognize the hopelessness of her situation. Fascinating hypothesis, chimed in a third participant. I've been reviewing human military doctrine, and their tactical approaches are astoundingly crude. They emphasize what they call close quarters combat, essentially physical contact with enemy forces. Can you imagine? Deliberately closing distance rather than maintaining optimal firing solutions. Reynolds's jaw tightened. Deliberately closing distance. Yeah, I can imagine. Their weapons technology is equally primitive, continued the melodic voice. Chemical propellants to accelerate metal projectiles. No energy manipulation, no quantum destabilization fields. They might as well be throwing stones. Stones, Wrench repeated thoughtfully. Now there's a throwback. The metal-grinding voice resumed. What puzzles me is their apparent pride in these limitations. Human military records contain references to something called hand-to-hand combat, as though physical contact represents some form of advanced technique. Cultural artifact, surely, suggested the third speaker. Primitive species often romanticize their obsolete behaviors. It's a form of psychological defense against technological inadequacy. Through the observation window, Kethvor's preparation had moved to the weapons testing phase. Robotic targets deployed throughout Bay 1 as he demonstrated his arsenal's capabilities. Plasma bolts reduced metal dummies to vapor, while energy beams carved precise geometric patterns in reinforced barriers. His shield generators projected defensive fields that deflected simulated projectiles without apparent effort. Jesus, Reynolds breathed. Those plasma bolts would go through battle armor like tissue paper. Probably, Wrench said again, now braiding the wire into increasingly complex patterns. What are you doing with that? Making improvements. The conversation in the corridor had shifted to comparative military analysis. The melodic voice was expounding on what it clearly considered a fascinating anthropological topic. Human warfare appears to prioritize what they term adaptability over technological superiority. Their soldiers are trained to function without support systems, to improvise weapons from available materials, to continue operations despite equipment failure. It's a remarkably inefficient approach. Inefficient, yes, but perhaps understandable given their limitations, the grinding voice conceded. When one lacks proper weapons technology, one must resort to primitive alternatives. Still, interjected the third voice, their emphasis on physical conditioning seems excessive. Why develop muscular strength when energy weapons eliminate the need for manual force application? Why train for endurance when tactical enhancement systems provide unlimited operational capacity? Reynolds had stopped pacing and was staring at Wrench with growing unease. What exactly did you do in the military? Served with distinction, she replied, without looking up from her work. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. The arena's public address system crackled to life, announcing a 15-minute delay while additional safety protocols were implemented. Apparently, someone had calculated the potential energy output of Kethvor's weapons systems and decided the standard barriers might prove inadequate. Additional safety protocols? Reynolds said bitterly. They're worried about collateral damage from his equipment. Meanwhile, you're sitting there braiding wire like you're making friendship bracelets. Not friendship bracelets, Wrench corrected. Garrote. The word hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Reynolds had been in enough military briefings to recognize the term, and its implications in the context of their current situation sent ice through his veins. Wrench. Chief, how many humans do you think are serving in active combat roles across the galaxy right now? The question seemed to come from nowhere, but Reynolds had learned to follow her conversational tangents. I don't know. Maybe a few thousand? We're not exactly military powerhouses compared to the major species. Few thousand, she repeated. And how many of those do you think are serving in what the nice aliens outside would consider proper military units? You know, energy weapons, shield generators, tactical enhancement systems? Reynolds considered this. Most of them, I'd guess. We adapt to local military standards wherever we serve. Exactly, we adapt. Wrench held up her completed garrote, testing its tensile strength with professional satisfaction. We learn their weapons, their tactics, their technological approaches. We become very good at fighting the way civilized species fight. And that means when someone like Keth Vore studies human military history, what he's really studying is humans fighting like aliens. The implications of this statement were beginning to penetrate Reynolds's awareness when the observation window's opacity shifted. Keth Vore's preparation had concluded, and he was being escorted toward the arena proper. His combat harness gleamed under the harsh lights, weapons systems fully charged, shield generators humming with barely contained energy. He moved with the fluid grace of someone completely integrated with their technology. "He looks ready," Reynolds observed. "He looks civilized," Wrench corrected. "There's a difference." The corridor voices were reaching a crescendo of academic excitement as the moment of confrontation approached. This should provide excellent data on the limitations of primitive combat methodologies, the melodic voice was saying. "I've prepared recording systems to capture detailed biomechanical analysis of human fighting techniques." "Assuming the demonstration lasts long enough to provide meaningful data," the grinding voice replied. "Keth Vore's preliminary energy output calculations suggest this encounter may conclude rather quickly." "Perhaps that's for the best," the third voice added. "Prolonged exposure to superior technology might prove traumatic for the human specimen." Wrench stood up, tucking the garrote into her coverall's pocket alongside her other improvised tools. She moved to the chamber's exit portal, where an arena official waited to escort her to the combat zone. "Wrench," Reynolds called after her. "What branch?" She paused at the threshold, considering the question and its implications. "Marines," she said finally. "Force reconnaissance. Dishonorably discharged for conduct unbecoming." "What kind of conduct?" For the first time since this entire situation had begun, Wrench smiled. It wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. "The effective kind." The arena floor stretched 30 meters in diameter, ringed by energy barriers that hummed with protective force fields. Above them, observation decks overflowed with alien spectators who had abandoned their various duties to witness what promised to be either an educational demonstration or a very brief execution. The betting pools had reached astronomical proportions. Entire asteroid mining rights were apparently changing hands based on projected combat duration. Keth Vore entered from the eastern portal, his appearance drawing appreciative clicks and harmonics from the crowd. His weapon systems cast dancing shadows across the arena floor as targeting lasers swept in precise geometric patterns. The combat harness had transformed him into something that belonged more in a military parade than a fighting ring. All gleaming surfaces and integrated technology that made the arena's own systems look primitive by comparison. Wrench walked through the western portal, wearing the same coveralls she'd started the day in. "Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary entities," announced the arena's AI moderator in 17 different languages simultaneously. "Today's cultural exchange features Keth Vore of the Hegemony Ascendant, champion of 43 victories against the human designation, Wrench." The crowd's reaction suggested they found her call sign amusing. Several species had apparently never encountered a human nickname before, and were debating its etymological implications in real time. "Standard arena protocols are in effect," the AI continued. "Combat concludes upon voluntary surrender, loss of consciousness, or inability to continue. Medical systems are standing by. May superior methodology prevail." Keth Vore activated his shield generators, surrounding himself with a shimmering energy field that distorted light and deflected the arena's atmospheric currents. His primary weapon, a plasma cannon integrated into his right forearm, began its charging sequence with a sound like distant thunder. "Tell me, little primitive," he called across the arena floor, "would you prefer a quick conclusion? I can adjust my weapon systems to ensure minimal suffering." "That's thoughtful of you," Wrench replied, walking slowly toward the arena's center. "But I'm curious about something first." "Oh? What might that be?" "When your species developed these weapons, these shields, these enhancement systems, what were you planning to fight?" The question clearly puzzled him. "Fight? We fight those who oppose the natural order, naturally. Lesser species who refuse to accept their proper place in the cosmic hierarchy. Lesser species like humans." "Precisely. Species that fight with their hands. Among other primitive behaviors, yes." Wrench nodded thoughtfully, still walking. "So you built all this technology to fight people who punch things. To dominate inferior combat methodologies through superior application of—" "You built plasma cannons," Wrench interrupted, "to fight people who punch things." From the observation decks came a wave of clicking, harmonizing, and energy pattern fluctuations that translated roughly to nervous laughter. Several spectators were beginning to realize that something about this conversation wasn't following the expected script. "The human appears to be exhibiting confusion," observed one of the academic voices from earlier. "Perhaps she lacks the cognitive framework to understand her disadvantage." "Alternatively," suggested another, "this may be some form of psychological defense mechanism. Primitive species often resort to irrational behavior when faced with overwhelming opposition." Keth Vor raised his plasma cannon, targeting systems painting bright red dots across Wrench's torso. "Your point, little primitive?" "My point," Wrench said, stopping just outside his optimal firing range, "is that you've never actually fought someone who fights with their hands." "Ridiculous. I have studied—" "You've studied humans fighting with your weapons, humans using your tactics, humans trying to be civilized." She took another step forward. "What you've never encountered is a human fighting like a human." The targeting dots tracked her movement with mechanical precision. Keth Vor's tactical analysis systems were running probability calculations, threat assessments, optimal engagement protocols. Every sensor in his combat harness was focused on the unremarkable figure walking steadily closer. "Combat initiation," announced the AI. "Weapons free." Keth Vor fired. The plasma bolt seared through the air where Wrench had been standing, striking the arena floor with enough force to leave a crater 2 meters wide. Superheated metal vapor rose in shimmering columns as emergency cooling systems activated to prevent structural damage. Wrench was no longer there. "Impossible," breathed someone in the observation deck. "Humans lack the reflexes for plasma avoidance at that range." Keth Vor's tactical systems were already recalibrating, searching for his target. His enhanced visual spectrum scanners swept the arena floor while his motion detectors analyzed atmospheric disturbances. The combat protocols embedded in his neural enhancement matrix had never encountered a target that could simply vanish from a locked firing solution. "Looking for me?" Wrench asked from directly behind him. He spun, bringing his secondary weapon systems online. Energy beams lanced through the space she had occupied, each shot precise enough to core a battleship's hull plating. His shield generators were operating at maximum efficiency, creating overlapping defensive fields that should have made him invulnerable to any conceivable attack. Wrench wasn't attacking, she was studying him. "Fascinating design philosophy," she commented, circling him at a distance just beyond his weapon's minimum engagement range. "Energy shields calibrated for projectile deflection, plasma weapons optimized for armored targets, targeting systems designed for long-range engagement. Very impressive." Stand still, Kithvor demanded, his weapon systems tracking her movement with increasing desperation. Face me with honor. Honor. Wrench's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. Is that what you call this? Standing there in your technological shell, firing energy weapons at someone wearing work clothes? I fight as civilized beings fight. You fight as civilized beings think they should fight, she corrected. There's a difference. The crowd had gone quiet. This wasn't following any recognizable pattern of combat they had studied. Kethvor possessed overwhelming technological superiority, yet somehow the initiative had shifted to his supposedly primitive opponent. The betting pools were experiencing unprecedented fluctuations as spectators tried to reconcile what they were witnessing with their understanding of how warfare worked. She's toying with him, Reynolds muttered from his position in the human section of the observation deck. Jesus Christ, she's actually toying with him. Wrench had moved closer again, now within what any reasonable tactical analysis would consider certain kill range. Kethvor's plasma cannon could vaporize her at this distance. His energy beams could slice her in half. His tactical systems were screaming warnings about optimal engagement protocols. You know what your problem is, Kethvor? She asked conversationally. Enlighten me, primitive. You think combat is about winning? She was close enough now that his targeting systems were having difficulty maintaining lock. Too close for optimal plasma discharge, too close for effective beam weapon deployment. His combat protocols had never anticipated an opponent who would deliberately enter suicidal range without attempting to attack. Combat is about winning, he insisted, switching to his close-range defensive systems. Energy barriers snapped into place around him like crystalline walls, powered by generators that could maintain defensive coherence against heavy artillery bombardment. No, Wrench said softly. Combat is about surviving. Something in her voice made the arena's atmospheric recycling systems seem suddenly inadequate. The temperature hadn't changed, but several spectators found themselves adjusting their environmental controls nonetheless. That's not combat, Kethvor declared, his weapon systems finally achieving optimal firing solutions. What you describe is mere survival instinct, base animal behavior. Exactly, Wrench agreed. And then she smiled. What happened next would be dissected by xenobiologists, military strategists, and philosophers for decades afterward. In the moment, however, it simply looked like a maintenance worker had finally lost her patience. Wrench's first move shattered 3 fundamental assumptions about human physiology. She didn't dodge Kethvor's next plasma discharge. She moved through the firing solution faster than his targeting computers could track, closing the distance while his weapon was still cycling. Her second move invalidated several theories about the limitations of unenhanced reflexes. She reached through his energy barriers like they were decorative curtains, her hands finding purchase on components that weren't supposed to be accessible to external manipulation. Her third move redefined everyone's understanding of what primitive actually meant. The sound Kethvor's primary weapon system made as it came apart wasn't mechanical failure. It was precision disassembly, performed by someone who understood exactly which components to disconnect in which order. Wrench had spent 3 years maintaining equipment far more sophisticated than his combat harness. She knew where the vulnerabilities were because she'd been fixing them. Impossible, gasped the melodic voice from the observation deck. Energy barriers cannot be penetrated by organic matter. They can't be penetrated by projectiles, Reynolds corrected grimly. Turns out there's a difference. Kethvor's tactical systems were experiencing cascading failures as Wrench systematically dismantled his technological advantages. His shield generators flickered and died as power conduits were severed with surgical precision. His targeting computers lost coherence as sensor arrays were detached from their mounting points. His backup weapon systems never had a chance to deploy because their activation switches were removed before they could cycle online. "This is not possible," he kept repeating, swinging his remaining functional arm in wild arcs as wrench flowed around his attacks like water. "This is not how combat works." "You're right," she agreed, ducking under a clumsy swing and relieving him of his secondary plasma projector. "This isn't combat." The arena had gone completely silent. Several spectators were frantically reviewing their recordings, convinced that their sensory equipment must be malfunctioning. The laws of physics, as they understood them, didn't permit organic beings to move like this, react like this, function like this without technological enhancement. "She's not enhanced," breathed someone in the academic section. "Scans show no biomodifications, no neural interfaces, no genetic optimization. She's completely baseline." "Baseline humans can't," another voice began. "Baseline humans can't do a lot of things," Reynolds interrupted over the communication channel. "Right up until they need to." Kethvor was no longer a technological marvel. He was 8 feet of confused alien trying to understand why his 4 million credit combat system had been reduced to decorative armor by a woman with a toolbox. His bio-enhancements were still functional, but without weapons or targeting systems, they were simply expensive jewelry. "Face me properly," he demanded, swinging a massive fist toward where Wrench had been standing. She was behind him again, this time holding something she'd improvised from his own targeting laser array. The device hummed with a sound that made several spectators check their life support systems. "I am facing you properly," she said calmly. "You're the one who's been fighting improperly. I fight as my ancestors fought, with honor, with superior technology." "Your ancestors," Wrench observed, "never met anything that fought back." The improvised device in her hands, part targeting laser, part power coupling, part something she'd assembled from wire and determination, pulsed once. Kethvor's bio-enhancement ports sparked and went dark. His hydraulic systems seized. His tactical display interfaces flickered and died. He collapsed. Not unconscious, simply reduced to what he actually was without technological assistance. A large, confused being who had never learned to fight with anything except overwhelming advantages. "Medical assistance to the arena floor," announced the AI moderator, its voice carrying notes of bewilderment that shouldn't have been possible for an artificial intelligence. The observation decks erupted in chaos. Betting pools were collapsing as spectators tried to comprehend what they had witnessed. Academic theories were being revised in real time. Several military observers were frantically updating their species' threat assessment databases. "That was not combat," insisted the grinding voice, now pitched higher with something that might have been panic. That was effective," finished Wrench, walking back toward the exit portal. The arena's medical systems deployed, surrounding Kethvor with diagnostic equipment that confirmed what everyone could see. He was physically unharmed but technologically neutered. His combat systems would require complete reconstruction. His bio-enhancements would need recalibration. His tactical neural interfaces had been so thoroughly scrambled that recovery might take months. "Wait," called one of the academic observers. "We need to understand what happened here. For scientific purposes, how did I what?" Wrench paused at the portal threshold. "How did you defeat superior technology with primitive methods?" "I didn't defeat his technology," she replied. "I maintained it, aggressively." The implications of this statement rippled through the observation decks like a sonic wave. Every species present had encountered human maintenance crews, human technical specialists, human engineers working on their most sensitive equipment. The realization of what those seemingly harmless interactions might actually represent was causing fundamental shifts in several civilizations' security protocols. "But the speed," protested the melodic voice, "the reflexes, the tactical awareness, Baseline humans cannot... Cannot what? Reynolds had joined the conversation channel, his voice carrying 30 years of military experience. Cannot adapt? Cannot improvise? Cannot survive when everything goes wrong and all your fancy equipment fails? That's not warfare, someone insisted. You're right, Reynolds agreed. That's something much worse. In the arena below, emergency crews were still working to restore Keith Vor's technological functions. His combat harness, which had cost more than most planets' annual defense budgets, was now an elaborate paperweight. Every system had been disabled with the kind of precision that required intimate knowledge of exactly how such systems operated. I don't understand, admitted a voice from the crystalline contingent. If humans possess such capabilities, why do they serve in our militaries using our methods? Why do they fight with our weapons instead of their own techniques? Wrench had almost reached the preparation chambers when she heard the question. She stopped, considering her response carefully. Because, she said finally, you asked us to. The arena fell silent again, as the full weight of that statement settled over the assembled observers. Every species present had indeed recruited humans into their military forces. Every civilization had trained human soldiers to fight using alien methods, alien weapons, alien tactics. They had assumed this was elevating primitive beings to civilized standards. They had never considered what would happen if the arrangement was reversed. Reynolds, Wrench called as she disappeared into the corridor. Yeah. Next time someone wants a cultural demonstration, suggest they try human hospitality instead. What's wrong with human hospitality? Her laughter echoed from the preparation chambers, carrying notes that made several alien security officers reflexively check their weapon systems. Nothing, she called back, as long as you're invited. The betting pools never did sort themselves out. Most of the wagers had been placed on combat duration, weapons effectiveness, and technological superiority. None of the bookmakers had thought to offer odds on the possibility that the fight would redefine the entire galaxy's understanding of what constituted a strategic threat. In the weeks that followed, human maintenance crews across the sector found themselves subject to unprecedented scrutiny. Several military installations quietly updated their security protocols regarding technical access. At least 3 civilizations began developing backup systems that couldn't be dismantled by individuals with advanced mechanical knowledge. Keith Vor eventually recovered. His combat systems were rebuilt, his bioenhancements recalibrated, his tactical interfaces restored to full functionality. He never entered an arena again. When asked why, he would only say that he had learned the difference between fighting and surviving. Most people assumed this was metaphorical. They were wrong.